The diner smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. I could taste both on my tongue as I wiped down the cracked vinyl booth for the third time, my hands moving in mechanical circles that required no thought. The rag was already dirty, streaked with ketchup and God knows what else. But Sal didn't care about clean as much as he cared about the appearance of effort. "Table 6 needs water," he barked from behind the counter, his voice cutting through the low hum of evening conversations and clinking silverware. I nodded without looking up, tucking a strand of dark hair behind my ear. It immediately fell forward again, too short to stay put, but too long to ignore. I'd cut it myself 3 weeks ago in my bathroom mirror, trying to save the $20 a salon would charge. $20 that went toward rent, toward food, toward the stack of bills that never seemed to get smaller no matter how many doubles I worked. My feet ached in my worn sneakers as I crossed the checkered floor of Rosie's Diner, the supposedly authentic 1950s throwback that served overpriced burgers to tourists who thought they were getting a genuine Chicago experience. The water pitcher was heavy in my hand, heavier than it should be, but everything felt heavy lately. I was so tired. The kind of tired that lived in your bones, that turned your thoughts sluggish and made simple tasks feel like climbing mountains. 2 jobs, 16-hour days, and still, somehow, never enough money to make the rent on time or pay down the debt that hung over me like a death sentence. My father's medical bills, $67,000 that had somehow transferred into the hands of people who didn't send polite reminder notices. They sent men with cold smiles who made it very clear what happened to people who didn't pay their debts in Chicago. I filled the glasses at table 6 with shaking hands, forcing a smile at the family of tourists who didn't even glance up from their phones. The nausea rolled through me in a familiar wave, the kind that had been coming every evening for the past 2 months. I swallowed hard, willing my stomach to settle, praying I could make it through the rest of my shift without running to the bathroom again. "Claire!" Sal's voice again, sharper this time. "VIP section. They just sat down. Go." I froze. The VIP section was really just a corner booth with slightly nicer upholstery, separated from the main floor by a half wall and some dying plants. We almost never used it. Most people who wanted privacy in Chicago didn't come to Rosie's Diner on West Madison. "Who is it?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. "Does it matter? Go take their order." I set down the water pitcher and smoothed my apron with damp palms. The walk to the VIP section felt longer than it should, each step weighted with a dread I couldn't name. Just customers, just another table. Nothing to be afraid of. But my body knew better. My instincts were screaming even before I rounded the corner and saw him. Connor Salvatore sat in the corner booth like he owned it. Like he owned everything. His dark suit probably cost more than I made in 3 months, perfectly tailored to his broad shoulders and lean frame. His black hair was swept back from his face, revealing those sharp cheekbones and the kind of face that made people stare. Beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. Dark brown, almost black, fixed on me with an intensity that made the air difficult to breathe. I'd seen those eyes before. In my dreams, in my nightmares, in every moment of weakness when I allowed myself to remember. 6 months. It had been 6 months since the last time I'd seen Connor Salvatore. 6 months since he'd disappeared from my life as suddenly as he'd entered it, leaving behind nothing but questions and consequences that grew inside me with each passing day. 2 men flanked him in the booth, both wearing similar suits, both watching me with the flat, assessing stares of people who hurt others for a living. But I barely registered them. My entire world had narrowed to Connor's face, to the slight curve of his lips that might have been a smile on anyone else, but looked predatory on him. "Hello, Claire." His voice was exactly as I remembered. Deep and smooth, with just a trace of the Italian accent he usually kept hidden. The voice that had whispered promises in dark rooms, that had told me things I desperately wanted to believe. My notepad slipped from my fingers and hit the floor. The slap of paper on linoleum seemed impossibly loud. My voice came out broken. I swallowed and tried again. I'll get someone else to take your table. No, not a request, a command. Sit down, Claire. We need to talk. I'm working. The words sounded pathetic even to my own ears. I can't just... Your shift ends in 20 minutes, Connor interrupted, glancing at the cheap watch on his wrist. The watch probably cost more than my car. More than 6 months of rent. I can wait, but you will sit down and you will listen to what I have to say. One of his men, the one with the scar bisecting his left eyebrow, leaned forward slightly. Not a threat. Not exactly. Just a reminder that I wasn't really being given a choice here. My legs were shaking as I slid into the booth across from Connor, as far from him as the limited space would allow. This close, I could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that brought back memories I'd tried desperately to bury. Memories of his hands on my skin, his mouth against my neck, his voice in my ear telling me that everything would be okay. Lies. All of it lies. You look tired, Connor said, his eyes scanning my face with an attention to detail that made me want to hide. You've lost weight. I've been busy. I kept my hands in my lap, fingers twisted together so tightly they hurt. If I kept them there, maybe he wouldn't notice the trembling. Maybe he wouldn't see how terrified I was. 2 jobs now, he continued as if I hadn't spoken. Rosie's diner and that late-night shift at the convenience store on Ashland. 16-hour days, 6 days a week. You're going to collapse, Claire. Ice flooded my veins. How do you know where I work? Something flickered in his expression. Regret, maybe, or calculation. With Connor, it was always impossible to tell. I've been keeping tabs on you, making sure you were safe. Safe? I laughed, the sound bitter and broken. You disappeared 6 months ago without a word. No explanation. No goodbye. You just vanished like you never existed. And now you're concerned about my safety. I had my reasons. I don't care about your reasons. The anger felt good, felt better than the fear that wanted to swallow me whole. You don't get to leave and then come back like nothing happened. You don't get to sit here and act like you have any right to know anything about my life. Connor leaned back in the booth, studying me with those dark, unreadable eyes. Your father, he said quietly. How is he? My blood turned to ice. Don't you dare bring my father into this. He's safe, Connor continued, ignoring my protest. Very safe. In a secure location where no one can hurt him. The world tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. What did you do? What I had to do. Connor's voice remained calm, measured, as if we were discussing the weather instead of whatever fresh nightmare he'd brought into my life. Your father stumbled onto some information he shouldn't have seen. Security footage, financial records, things that certain people would kill for. Let him go. My voice broke on the words. Whatever this is, whatever you want, just let him go. He's innocent. He doesn't know anything. He knows enough to be dangerous, Connor said. To himself and to you. My rivals would use him to get to me, Claire. They'd torture him for information and then kill him just to send a message. The place I have him? That's the only reason he's still alive. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. Why are you doing this? Connor was silent for a long moment, his gaze holding mine with an intensity that made it impossible to look away. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer, almost gentle. Because I need you, Claire, and this is the only way to make sure you say yes. Yes to what? To marrying me. The words hung in the air between us, impossible and insane. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for the moment when he'd laugh and tell me this was all some sick joke. But his expression remained serious, almost solemn. "You're insane," I whispered. "I have business partners. Traditional Italian families who value old-world customs and family structures. They're investing heavily in a new venture, but they're hesitant about working with a bachelor. They want to see stability, commitment, a wife. So buy one," I snapped. "I'm sure there are plenty of women who'd be happy to marry into money and ignore where it comes from." "I don't want just anyone," Connor said. "I want you." "Why?" The question came out as a plea. "Why me? We were together for what, 3 months? And that was 6 months ago. Why come back now?" Connor leaned forward, his elbows on the table, bringing him close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Because I never stopped thinking about you. Because you're the only person in my life who ever looked at me like I was human instead of a monster. Because—" He paused, his gaze dropping to where my hand rested on my stomach, a protective gesture I hadn't even realized I was making. My breath caught. No. He couldn't know. There was no way he could know. "How far along are you?" His voice was barely above a whisper. 3 months? 4? I don't know what you're talking about. But the lie was useless. He could see it in my face, in the way my hand pressed tighter against my still flat stomach. "It's mine." Not a question. A statement of absolute certainty. I wanted to deny it, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that it could be anyone's, that he had no claim to the life growing inside me. But the words wouldn't come. Because it was his, and we both knew it. "The marriage," Connor continued, his voice taking on a business-like tone that somehow made everything worse. 6 months. That's all I need. 6 months to satisfy my investors, to close this deal, to secure my position. You'll live in my home. You'll appear at my side at necessary events. You'll play the part of the devoted wife. And then? I forced the words out through numb lips. And then you're free. Your father is released. The debt is erased. You'll receive a settlement that will set you up for life. Enough to raise the baby comfortably, to never have to work 2 jobs again, to have the security you've never had. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it absolutely was. "You're lying," I said. "This is a trap. You're not going to let me go after 6 months. Something dark flickered across Connor's face. "I'm offering you a solution, Claire. Your father's life for 6 months of your time. That's the deal. Take it or leave it." "And if I leave it?" The temperature in the booth seemed to drop several degrees. "Then your father stays where he is. And you continue working yourself to death trying to pay off a debt you'll never escape. And when that baby is born, you'll be doing it alone, with no money, no support, and people watching you who would love to use that child against me." The trap closed around me with the finality of a prison door slamming shut. He'd thought of everything. Every angle, every possibility, every way I might try to escape. He'd cornered me perfectly. "I need to think about it," I said, though we both knew I didn't have a choice. "You have until tomorrow night," Connor replied, sliding a business card across the table. "Call this number with your answer." "But Claire?" He waited until I met his eyes again. "The answer is yes. You just don't know it yet." He stood, his men rising with him like synchronized shadows. For a moment, Connor looked down at me, his expression unreadable. Then he reached out and tucked that loose strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers gentle against my skin. "I'll take care of you," he said quietly. "Both of you. That's a promise." Then he was gone, sweeping out of the diner with his entourage, leaving me sitting alone in the booth with a business card and a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. My hand moved to my stomach again, to the secret I'd been keeping, The consequence of 3 passionate months with a man I'd thought I could trust. A man who'd disappeared and now reappeared with chains disguised as salvation. 6 months, he'd said. But as I sat there in the fading light of Rosie's diner, surrounded by the smell of burnt coffee and desperation, I knew with absolute certainty that Connor Salvatore had no intention of ever letting me go. He'd orchestrated this whole thing, the debt, the danger, the perfectly timed reappearance, all of it designed to trap me in a cage I couldn't see. And the most terrifying part? The small, broken piece of my heart that had never stopped loving him was almost relieved. I picked up the business card with trembling fingers. "Tomorrow night," he'd said, but I already knew my answer. I'd known it the moment I saw him sitting in that booth, looking at me like I was something precious and terrifying all at once. I'd say yes, because I had no choice, because he'd made sure of that, because Connor Salvatore always got what he wanted, and apparently, what he wanted was me. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Connor's face, heard his voice making promises that felt more like threats. The business card sat on my nightstand, white and innocuous, the phone number printed in elegant black script mocking me with its simplicity. 1 call. That's all it would take to seal my fate. By morning, I'd convinced myself I could find another way. There had to be another way. I could go to the police, tell them my father was being held against his will. Except I had no proof. No idea where Connor was keeping him. And Connor Salvatore wasn't the kind of man who left loose ends for the police to follow. I could run. Take what little money I had and disappear. Except I'd still be broke, pregnant, and hunted. And my father would remain wherever Connor had stashed him, insurance against my cooperation. The convenience store shift dragged by in a haze of exhaustion and nausea. Every customer who walked through the door made me jump, certain it would be one of Connor's men. By the time my relief showed up at 6 a.m., I was a wreck of jangled nerves and suppressed panic. I stumbled out into the gray Chicago dawn, pulling my thin jacket tighter against the October chill. My car, a 15-year-old Honda with a cracked windshield and a temperamental starter, sat in its usual spot 3 blocks away. The walk felt longer than usual, my feet dragging, my mind spinning through impossible scenarios. I was halfway to the car when I noticed him, a man in a dark suit, leaning against the building across the street, watching me, not hiding, not even pretending to be doing anything else, just watching. My heart hammered against my ribs. I walked faster, fumbling for my keys. The Honda's lock stuck as always, requiring 3 tries before the door finally opened. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. The man hadn't moved, still watching, making sure I knew I was being watched. I drove home through empty streets, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds. No one followed. At least, no one I could see. But that almost made it worse. The invisibility of the surveillance. The certainty that Connor's eyes were on me even when I couldn't see them. My apartment building looked the same as always. Crumbling brick, broken intercom, the faint smell of garbage from the alley. Home. Except it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a cage I'd been living in without realizing it. I trudged up the 3 flights of stairs, exhaustion making each step an effort. My door was unlocked. I knew I'd locked it before leaving for work. I always locked it. The deadbolt, the chain, everything. But now the door swung open at my touch, revealing my dark apartment beyond. Terror flooded my system, cold and sharp. Someone had been here. Someone might still be here. I should have run. Should have called the police. Should have done anything except what I actually did, which was step inside and flip on the light switch with trembling fingers. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it. Same dishes in the sink. Same pile of laundry on the chair. Same generic furniture that came with the furnished rental. Nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place. but something was different. I could feel it. A presence, like the air itself had been disturbed and hadn't quite settled back into normalcy. Then I saw it. A manila envelope on my small dining table. Thick and heavy, with my name written across the front in elegant handwriting I didn't recognize. I approached it the way someone might approach a bomb, certain it would explode the moment I touched it. My fingers shook as I picked it up, feeling the weight of photographs inside. The first picture made my stomach drop. Me, leaving Rosie's diner 3 weeks ago. The angle was from across the street, zoomed in enough to show my face clearly. The timestamp in the corner read 11:47 p.m. The second photo showed me at the convenience store, visible through the window, restocking cigarettes behind the counter. 2 weeks ago, according to the timestamp. The third was worse. Me at the free clinic on the south side, the one I'd gone to for the pregnancy confirmation, because I couldn't afford a real doctor. The angle captured me walking out, clutching a handful of pamphlets about prenatal care. There were dozens more. Me getting coffee. Me at the laundromat. Me sitting in my car outside my apartment, forehead resting against the steering wheel in a moment of private despair I'd thought no one had witnessed. He'd been watching me for weeks, maybe months. Every movement tracked. Every moment documented. The surveillance wasn't new. It had been happening all along, invisible and constant, and I'd never known. My phone rang, the sound so sudden and sharp in the silent apartment that I dropped the envelope. Photographs scattered across the floor like evidence of my own stupidity. I knew who it was before I looked at the screen. Unknown number, of course. Hello? My voice came out steady somehow, despite the way my entire body was shaking. Did you get my gift? Connor's voice was warm, almost playful, like this was a game and he was enjoying himself. You broke into my apartment. I tried to sound angry instead of terrified, failed miserably at both. I have a key, he corrected. Your landlord was very cooperative once I explained that I was your fiancé, checking on the place while you were at work. He was happy to help. Even mentioned how you're 3 weeks late on rent. The casual mention of my financial struggles felt like a slap. What do you want, Connor? I want you to understand something, Claire. I want you to really understand it, so there's no confusion later. His tone shifted, losing the playful edge, becoming something harder and colder. You're mine. You've been mine since the moment I decided I wanted you. The debt, your father, the baby, all of it just gave me the leverage I needed to make you see it too. I'm not yours, I whispered, but even I didn't believe it. You called me, he continued, ignoring my protest. You were supposed to call tonight with your answer, but you were going to say no, weren't you? You were going to try to find another way out. So I'm removing that option. You can't just... I already did. Something rustled on his end of the line, papers maybe, or the sound of movement. Your landlord has been notified that you're vacating the apartment effective immediately. Your belongings will be moved to my home by this evening. Your shifts at both jobs have been covered for the indefinite future. Your phone number is being transferred to a new device that will be provided to you. Each word was a nail in the coffin of my autonomy. You can't do this. This is kidnapping. This is marriage, Connor said smoothly. Or it will be, once you sign the papers. Which you will. Today. Because your father's continued safety depends on your cooperation. Let me talk to him. The demand came out desperate. I need to know he's okay. Silence on the other end. Long enough that I thought he might refuse. Then, distantly, I heard shuffling and muffled voices. A moment later, my father's voice came through the speaker, thin and confused. Claire? Honey, is that you? Dad! Relief and terror warred in my chest. Are you okay? Are they hurting you? I'm fine, sweetheart. I don't understand what's going on, but these men, they say they're protecting me from something. Claire, what kind of trouble are you in? My throat closed around the words. How could I possibly explain this? Dad, just do what they tell you. Don't fight them. I'm going to fix this, I promise. Claire, you need to tell me what's happening. Are you safe? Is this about the medical bills? Because I told you we'd figure something out. You don't need to... The line went dead. Connor's voice replaced my father's, smooth and implacable. He's comfortable, well-fed, has access to books, television, anything he needs. As long as you cooperate, he'll stay that way. I hate you. The words felt inadequate for the rage and helplessness churning inside me. No, you don't, Connor said quietly. You want to hate me, but you don't. That's what makes this so much easier. He was right, and that made it so much worse. Part of me, that stupid, broken part that had fallen for him 6 months ago, still responded to his voice. Still remembered the way he'd looked at me like I was something precious. Still wanted to believe that underneath all this manipulation and control, there was something real. A car will pick you up in 2 hours, Connor continued, businesslike now. Pack whatever you want to bring. Sentimental items, clothes, whatever you need. Everything else will be replaced. And if I refuse? Then the car will pick you up anyway, just with fewer of your possessions. Claire, stop fighting this. You've already lost. The question isn't whether you're coming. The question is whether you come willingly or in handcuffs. I'd prefer willing, but I'm flexible. The threat wasn't subtle, wasn't meant to be. 2 hours, I said finally, defeat tasting like ash in my mouth. Good girl. The approval in his voice made my skin crawl, or maybe it made something else happen, something I didn't want to examine too closely. Oh, and Claire? One more thing. What? Don't try to run. Don't call the police. Don't do anything stupid, because the men watching you right now, they're not just watching. They're waiting. And I'd hate for things to get messy. The line went dead. I stood in my apartment, surrounded by surveillance photos, feeling the invisible eyes on me from every angle. Trapped in a cage I'd only just realized existed. I had 2 hours. 2 hours to pack up a life that was already gone. 2 hours before I became the property of a man who'd orchestrated this entire nightmare with the precision of someone who did this kind of thing regularly. The worst part wasn't the fear. Wasn't even the loss of freedom. The worst part was the small, shameful flutter in my chest that felt almost like anticipation. Because I was going to see him again, going to be near him again. And that broken, desperate part of me that had never stopped loving him was almost grateful for the chains he was wrapping around me. I picked up the photos from the floor, stacking them back into the envelope with mechanical precision. Evidence of my surveillance. Proof of my powerlessness. Connor's gift to make me understand exactly how thoroughly he owned me. And as I started pulling clothes from my tiny closet, packing the few things that mattered into a duffel bag that had seen better days, I realized something that made my blood run cold. He'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. The debt had always been his. The danger to my father had always been his creation. Even our initial meeting, those 3 months together that I'd thought were organic and real, had probably been orchestrated from the beginning. I wasn't falling into his trap. I'd been in it all along, thinking I was free while the walls closed in around me. My hand moved to my stomach again, that unconscious protective gesture that was becoming habit. The baby, his baby. Another chain. Another piece of leverage. Did he plan this too? Had he known from the beginning that I'd end up pregnant, giving him permanent hold over me? The thought made me nauseous, but I couldn't shake it. Connor Salvatore didn't do anything by accident. Every move was calculated. every piece carefully positioned on a board I hadn't even known I was playing on. I sat on my bed, surrounded by the detritus of my small life, and let myself cry. Not pretty crying, not quiet sniffles. Full, ugly sobs that tore out of my chest and left me gasping, because this was the last moment I'd have alone, the last moment of autonomy, even the illusion of it. In 2 hours the car would come. In 2 hours I'd step into Connor's world permanently, into his home, his life, his control. 6 months he'd promised. But as I wiped tears from my face and resumed packing, I knew that was a lie. Connor hadn't gone to all this trouble for 6 months. He'd gone to this trouble forever. And the most terrifying part was that I was almost relieved I wouldn't have to fight anymore. That someone else was making the decisions. That I could finally stop running and just surrender to the inevitable. Maybe that made me weak. Maybe that made me a victim instead of a survivor. Or maybe that just made me human, tired and scared, and so desperately lonely that even captivity felt better than the isolation I'd been living in. The buzzer sounded exactly 2 hours later, not a minute early, not a minute late, because Connor's people were nothing if not punctual. I picked up my duffel bag, took one last look at the apartment that had been my refuge and my prison, and walked out the door. I didn't look back. There was no point. My old life ended the moment I stepped into that black SUV with tinted windows and men in suits who didn't speak. My new life, whatever that would be, was waiting. And Connor Salvatore was at the center of it, pulling strings I couldn't see, controlling everything with the casual certainty of someone who'd never been denied anything he wanted. He wanted me. And now he had me. The house wasn't what I expected. Somehow I'd imagined something cold and imposing, all marble and dark wood, the kind of place that screamed money and menace in equal measure. Instead, Connor's home was almost beautiful. A brownstone in Lincoln Park, elegant and understated, with tall windows that let in streams of afternoon light and hardwood floors that gleamed with care. The men who'd driven me deposited my duffel bag in the foyer without a word and disappeared, leaving me standing alone in the entrance hall. A curved staircase swept upward to the second floor. Original crown molding traced the ceiling. Artwork that looked expensive but not ostentatious hung on walls painted in soft, neutral tones. It looked like a home. That was the most unsettling part. Not a fortress or a prison, but an actual home where real people might live normal lives. "Do you like it?" Connor's voice came from somewhere to my left. I turned to find him standing in a doorway, leaning against the frame with casual grace. He'd changed since the diner. Traded his suit for dark slacks and a gray sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous instead of less. More human. More real. "Does it matter?" I kept my voice flat, refusing to give him the satisfaction of any reaction. "It matters to me." He pushed off the doorframe and walked toward me, each step measured and deliberate. "You're going to be living here. I want you to be comfortable." Comfortable. The word tasted bitter. I'm being held prisoner. Comfort doesn't really factor into it. Connor stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne, that woodsy scent that brought back memories I'd tried to bury. "You're not a prisoner, Claire. You're my fiancé, soon to be my wife. There's a difference." "Not from where I'm standing." Something flickered in his dark eyes. Amusement, maybe, or approval. "Come, let me show you your room." He reached for my duffel bag, but I grabbed it first, needing to hold on to something, some last shred of control over my own possessions. Connor's lips curved in a small smile, as if he found my defiance endearing rather than irritating. He led me up the stairs, past a hallway lined with more artwork and closed doors, to a room at the end of the corridor. When he opened it, I couldn't suppress a small gasp. The bedroom was huge, at least 3 times the size of my entire apartment. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall, dressed in soft white linens that looked like clouds. French doors opened onto a small balcony overlooking a private garden. A walk-in closet bigger than my old bedroom stood open, already half filled with clothes I'd never seen before. "I had some things brought in," Connor said, noticing where my gaze had landed. "We'll need to get you properly fitted for evening wear, but these should work for now. Your size, yes?" I didn't answer. Couldn't answer, because he was right. Everything in that closet would fit me perfectly, which meant he'd been planning this in detail, measuring me, cataloging me, preparing for the moment when he could finally cage me in luxury. "The bathroom is through there." He gestured to another door. "The closet connects to a dressing room if you need more space. And this..." He walked to a small desk by the window and picked up a sleek black phone. "Your new number. All your contacts have been transferred. Your father can reach you on it. So can I." How thoughtful. I set my duffel bag down, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the past few hours was draining away, leaving only the bone-deep weariness that had become my constant companion. Connor was watching me with that intense focus he had, the kind that made me feel like he could see straight through my skin to all the vulnerable places I tried to keep hidden. "You need to rest. You look like you're about to collapse." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You've been working yourself to death for months. When was the last time you slept more than 4 hours? When was the last time you ate a full meal?" His voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. "I know everything, Claire. Your schedule, your bills, the fact that you've been skipping dinner most nights to save money." The invasion of privacy should have made me angry. Instead, I just felt defeated. "What do you want from me, Connor? Really, not the performance for your investors, not the 6-month marriage. What do you actually want?" He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said quietly, "Sit down. There's something I need to tell you." I didn't want to sit. Didn't want to make myself comfortable in this cage he'd built. But my legs were shaking and my feet hurt, and I was so tired of fighting. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress so soft I nearly groaned. Connor pulled the desk chair over and sat facing me, close enough that our knees almost touched. "Do you remember how we met?" The question caught me off guard. "The hospital. You came in with one of your men who'd been injured." "Before that." His eyes held mine. 3 weeks before. You were at a coffee shop on Michigan Avenue. It was raining. You'd just gotten off a shift and your scrubs were visible under your coat. You ordered black coffee and a muffin, then sat in the corner reading a paperback novel that was falling apart at the seams. My breath caught. I remembered that day. Remembered the coffee shop, the rain, the blessed hour of solitude before I had to go to my second job. But I'd been alone. Completely alone. "I watched you for 45 minutes, Connor continued, his voice low and steady. "Watched the way you turned the pages carefully so they wouldn't tear. The way you smiled at something in the book. The way you checked your phone every few minutes like you were waiting for bad news. And I wanted to know you. So you orchestrated an elaborate scheme to force me into your life." I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Very romantic." "I bought your father's debt that day," Connor said, and the confession hit like a physical blow. "Before I even spoke to you, before I knew your name, I saw you in that coffee shop and I knew I had to have you. So I found out who you were, and I bought the leverage I'd need." The room spun slightly. "That was 9 months ago." "Yes. You've been planning this for 9 months. Longer." Connor leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped between them. "Claire, I don't do anything by accident. When I want something, I acquire it. When I want someone, I make sure they have no choice but to come to me. That's insane. My voice shook. That's not love. That's obsession. Call it what you want. His dark eyes bored into mine. But don't pretend our time together wasn't real. Those 3 months before I left, that was real. Every word I said to you, every moment we shared, real. Then why did you leave? The question burst out of me, raw and painful. If it was so real, why did you disappear? Connor's jaw tightened. For the first time since I'd arrived, he looked uncomfortable, uncertain, because I was going to be killed. There was a contract on my life, a rival family trying to take over my territory. They'd gotten close, closer than they should have, and they knew about you. The air left my lungs in a rush. What? You were photographed with me, identified as someone I cared about, which meant you became a target. His hands clenched into fists. I had 2 choices. Either bring you into my world completely, surround you with security, make you a prisoner for your own safety, or cut you loose, make it look like you meant nothing to me, let you go back to your normal life. So you just vanished. The hurt in my voice surprised me. After everything he'd done, after all the manipulation and control, it was the abandonment that still cut the deepest. I had men watching you, Connor said. Always, making sure you were safe, that no one connected to my world came near you. I stayed away because my presence would have put you in danger, and I told myself it was better that way, that you'd move on, find someone normal, have the life you deserved. But then I got pregnant. But then you got pregnant, he repeated softly. And suddenly staying away wasn't an option anymore. That's my child, Claire. Mine. And I wasn't going to let you raise it alone, struggling to survive, vulnerable to anyone who might want to use you against me. I stood abruptly, needing distance, needing space to think. So you created a crisis, made my father find evidence that would put him in danger, gave yourself an excuse to swoop in and save the day. Your father's danger is real, Connor said, rising to follow me. The evidence he found is real. My rivals would absolutely use him to get to me if they knew about the connection. That part isn't fabricated, Claire. The threat is genuine. But you're using it to control me. I'm using it to protect you. He closed the distance between us in 2 strides, his hands coming to rest on my shoulders. The touch sent electricity through me, unwanted and undeniable. You think I want it to be like this? You think I enjoy knowing you're here because you have no choice? Yes, I said flatly. I think you do. I think you've orchestrated this entire situation so you could have exactly what you want without any risk of rejection. Connor's grip tightened slightly on my shoulders. Not painful, but firm, unyielding. What I want is for you to be safe, for our child to be safe, for us to have a chance at something real. There's nothing real about a forced marriage. Then let's make it real. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. 6 months. That's what I promised you. 6 months of pretending for my investors. But what if we used that time to actually build something? What if we gave this a real chance? I stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. But Connor's expression was open, almost vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. You're serious. I've wanted you since the moment I saw you in that coffee shop, he said quietly. Everything I've done since then has been to get you here, to this moment, where I finally have a chance to show you who I really am. Not the monster you think I am. Not the criminal. Just a man who wants you more than he's ever wanted anything. You're still holding my father hostage, for his protection, which is also your protection. Connor's thumbs stroked small circles on my shoulders, the gesture oddly soothing. Claire, listen to me. My world is dangerous. The people I deal with don't play by normal rules. Your father saw things that could get him killed, get you killed, get our baby killed. The only way to keep you all safe is to bring you into my protection completely. By marrying you. By marrying me, he confirmed. By making you untouchable. A Salvatore. Under my protection. Beyond the reach of anyone who might want to hurt you. The logic was twisted, but not entirely wrong. If Connor was as powerful as he seemed, if his world was as dangerous as he claimed, then maybe being his wife would offer a kind of protection. A terrible, suffocating kind, but protection nonetheless. And after 6 months? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What happens then? Connor's hand slid from my shoulders down my arms, his touch leaving trails of heat in its wake. After 6 months, you decide. If you want to leave, if you want to take the baby and go, I'll let you. I'll make sure you have everything you need. Security. Money. A life far from this one. You're lying. I'm not. His dark eyes held mine, intense and unwavering. 6 months, Claire. Give me 6 months to prove that this can work, that we can work. And if at the end of it you still want to leave, I'll let you go. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But belief required trust. And trust was something Connor had systematically destroyed from the moment he orchestrated my father's death. I need time, I said finally. Time to think. Time to process all of this. Connor studied me for a moment longer, then nodded and stepped back, giving me space. Dinner is at 7. Someone will come get you. We have things to discuss. Logistics, the wedding, rules. Rules, I repeated flatly. Boundaries, he amended. Things we both need to agree on if this is going to work. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. Claire, I know you don't believe me right now. I know you think this is all manipulation and control, but I meant what I said. I want this to be real. I want you to choose to stay. But you're not giving me a choice. I'm giving you the only choice I can, Connor said quietly. The only one that keeps you alive. 6 months from now, when the danger has passed and my position is secure, then you'll have all the choices in the world. Until then, you're mine to protect, whether you like it or not. He left, closing the door softly behind him. I stood in the middle of that beautiful prison of a bedroom, my hand pressed against my stomach, feeling the flutter of a life that had just gotten infinitely more complicated. 6 months. He'd promised 6 months. But promises from Connor Salvatore were like chains made of silk, beautiful and deadly and impossible to escape. I walked to the French doors and pushed them open, stepping onto the balcony. The garden below was peaceful, well-maintained, surrounded by high walls that probably had security cameras hidden in every corner. A beautiful cage for a bird who'd never asked to be caught. The worst part was that some small, broken piece of me was relieved to stop fighting, relieved to let someone else make the decisions, relieved that I wouldn't have to face the pregnancy alone, wouldn't have to work myself to death, wouldn't have to wake up every morning terrified of what fresh disaster the day would bring. Connor was offering me a prison, but it was a prison with soft beds and full meals and safety from the grinding poverty that had been slowly killing me. And maybe that made me weak. Maybe that made me complicit in my own captivity. Or maybe that just made me human, tired and scared and desperate enough to accept comfort, even when it came wrapped in chains. I stood on that balcony, watching the sun set over Lincoln Park, and tried to imagine what the next 6 months would bring. Tried to imagine becoming Connor's wife, sharing his home, playing the role he'd written for me in this elaborate script he'd been crafting for 9 months, and tried not to think about what would happen if, at the end of those 6 months, I didn't want to leave. Because that was the real trap, wasn't it? Not the forced marriage or the manipulation or the threats. The real trap was that part of me that had never stopped loving him. That responded to his touch and his voice and his attention like a flower turning toward the sun. Connor Salvatore was dangerous, controlling, obsessive, everything I should run from. But he was also offering me something I'd never had: security, protection, someone who wanted me enough to move heaven and earth to keep me. And God help me, that was almost enough. Someone knocked at exactly 7 p.m. Not Connor, but a woman I hadn't seen before. She was older, maybe 50, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in an elegant bun and the kind of clothes that whispered money rather than shouting it. "Miss Bennett," she said with a slight Italian accent. "I'm Maria. I manage Mr. Salvatore's household. He's waiting for you in the dining room." I followed her down the stairs and through a hallway I hadn't seen yet, my stomach churning with anxiety and something else I didn't want to name. The dining room was intimate rather than grand, with a table set for 2, candles already lit, and the smell of something delicious wafting from the kitchen. Connor stood when I entered, pulling out a chair with the kind of old-world courtesy that should have seemed ridiculous but somehow didn't. He'd changed again, now wearing a dark button-down with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that I remembered too well. "I wasn't sure what you'd like," he said as I sat. So I had Maria prepare several options. Italian, obviously, but also some American comfort food in case you were feeling nostalgic. I'm not hungry. A lie. I was starving. I'd barely eaten in days, and the smells coming from the kitchen were making my mouth water despite everything. Connor's lips quirked in a small smile that said he knew exactly how hungry I was. "Humor me anyway. You're eating for 2 now." Maria appeared with plates, setting them down with practiced efficiency. Chicken parmesan that looked nothing like any I'd ever had, pasta in a cream sauce that smelled divine, roasted vegetables glistening with olive oil. My stomach growled audibly, betraying me. "Eat," Connor said gently. "Then we'll talk." I picked up my fork, telling myself I was only complying because the baby needed nutrition, not because Connor's voice carried that note of concern that made something in my chest ache. The first bite was incredible, and I had to suppress a sound of pleasure that would have been too revealing. We ate in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the clink of silverware and the distant noises of Maria moving through the house. It was almost peaceful, almost normal, if I didn't think too hard about the circumstances that had brought me here. "I need to tell you something," Connor said finally, setting down his fork. "There was an incident today, after you left your apartment." My blood ran cold. "What kind of incident?" "Someone tried to access the building. 2 men, claiming to be utility workers. They were looking for you." His dark eyes were serious, the playfulness from earlier completely gone. "They weren't utility workers, Claire. They were Marco Vitelli's people." The name meant nothing to me, but the way Connor said it made my skin prickle with fear. "Who's Marco Vitelli?" "A rival. Someone who's been trying to move into my territory for the past year." Connor leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "He's the reason I left 6 months ago, the reason I stayed away, and he's the reason your father is in protective custody right now. I don't understand." "Your father works at the warehouse district on the south side, yes? Security guard for a logistics company?" Connor waited for my nod. "That company is one of Vitelli's fronts. They use it to move product, launder money, handle shipments they don't want traced. Your father saw something he shouldn't have. Security footage that showed faces, operations, things that could bring down Vitelli's entire organization if they fell into the wrong hands." My fork clattered against my plate. "Dad wouldn't... He doesn't He copied the files, Connor interrupted. Probably thinking he should turn them over to the police. Do the right thing. Noble. Stupid. But noble. Except Vitelli found out before he could act. And that's when I intervened. You took him before Vitelli could. Understanding crashed over me like ice water. That's why he's in your safe house. That's why he's alive, Connor corrected. Vitelli doesn't leave witnesses, Claire. Your father had evidence that could destroy him. The moment Vitelli knew about those files, your father was a dead man walking. I got to him first. I pushed my plate away, suddenly nauseous again. And me? Why come after me? Because Vitelli knows you exist. Knows you're important to me, even though I tried to keep our connection hidden. And because he's smart enough to realize that if he can't get to your father, he'll go through you to draw me out. Connor's jaw tightened. This afternoon was a probe, testing to see if you were vulnerable. They didn't expect to find you gone already. So you didn't just kidnap me. You rescued me. The words tasted bitter despite their truth. I protected what's mine, Connor said quietly. And you are mine, Claire, whether you accept that yet or not. Stop saying that. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I'm not property. I'm not a possession you can claim. Connor rose as well, moving around the table toward me with that predatory grace that made my breath catch. You're carrying my child. That makes you family, and I protect family above all else. That's not possession, Claire. That's responsibility. Responsibility you forced on me by orchestrating this entire situation. Responsibility I accepted the moment I decided I wanted you. He stopped just inches away, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him. You think I don't know how this looks? You think I don't understand that you see me as the villain here? But I'm not the one trying to kill you, Claire. I'm the one standing between you and a very real threat. A threat you brought into my life. A threat that existed long before me, Connor countered. Your father's debt? That was real before I bought it. The danger he walked into at that warehouse? That existed independent of me. All I did was position myself to be the solution when the crisis hit. The logic was twisted, but not entirely wrong, and that made me want to scream. So what now? I'm supposed to be grateful? Thank you for saving me from a danger that exists because of your world? No, Connor's hand came up, cupping my face with surprising gentleness. You're supposed to let me protect you. Let me take care of you and our baby. Let me give you the life you deserve instead of the one you've been barely surviving. And in return? In return, you play your part. My wife, my partner, the woman I present to my investors and business associates. His thumb stroked across my cheekbone, the touch sending shivers down my spine. You attend dinners. Smile at the right people. Look like you're exactly where you want to be. Pretend to love you, I whispered. Pretend, Connor agreed, his voice dropping lower. Or don't pretend. That's up to you. The implication hung between us, charged and dangerous. His hand was still on my face, his body so close I could count his heartbeats. It would be so easy to close the distance, to give in to the pull I'd been fighting since the moment I saw him in that diner booth. But I couldn't, wouldn't. Not when every touch was calculated, every gesture part of some larger game I didn't understand. I stepped back, breaking contact, putting distance between us. Rules, I said, my voice shakier than I'd like. You said we needed to establish rules. Something flickered in Connor's eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or frustration. But he nodded and moved back to the table, pulling out a document I hadn't noticed before. Boundaries, actually. Things we both agree to. I sat back down, grateful for the table between us, and looked at the paper he slid across to me. It was a list, typed in neat bullet points, Surprisingly reasonable given everything else. Separate bedrooms unless otherwise agreed upon. No physical intimacy without explicit consent. Freedom to move within the house and grounds. Access to phone and internet with certain security restrictions. Regular contact with my father. Medical care for the pregnancy. A generous monthly allowance for personal expenses. These are your terms? I asked, scanning the list. These are our terms, Connor corrected. You're not a prisoner, Claire. You're my fiancé. There's a difference. And if I break these rules, you won't. He said it with absolute certainty. Because they're reasonable. Because I'm giving you everything you need to be comfortable. Because the alternative is going back to working 2 jobs while pregnant, constantly looking over your shoulder for Vitelli's men. He was right. That was the worst part. These terms were more than fair given the circumstances. They gave me autonomy, privacy, safety, everything I'd been lacking for months. There's one more thing, Connor said, producing another document. The prenuptial agreement, standard stuff, protections for both of us. But there's a clause I want you to pay attention to. He pointed to a section near the end. I read it twice, not quite believing what I was seeing. After 6 months of marriage, if I chose to leave, I'd receive a settlement of $5 million. Full custody of the child with generous visitation rights for Connor. A house, fully paid. Security detail for life. Everything I'd need to start over somewhere far from Chicago and the danger that came with the Salvatore name. $5 million, I said faintly. Enough to never worry about money again. Enough to give our child everything they need. Enough to build whatever life you want. Connor's expression was unreadable. I told you I'd let you go after 6 months. This proves it. Or it's insurance that I'll stay. The cynicism came automatically. Make the payout so large that I'll feel guilty taking it. It's insurance that you'll have choices, Connor said. Real choices. Not the illusion of choice I've given you so far. He pulled out a pen and signed both documents with a flourish, then slid them across to me. Sign these. Marry me tomorrow. Give me 6 months to prove this can work. And if at the end of it you still want to walk away, you can. With my blessing and my bank account. I stared at the documents, at Connor's signature already dry on the pages. This was it. The moment of surrender. The moment where I stopped fighting and accepted the inevitable. My hand shook as I picked up the pen. Tomorrow? I've already arranged everything. Small ceremony here at the house. Just us, a judge, and a few witnesses. Nothing dramatic. We'll do the big show for the investors later, but the legal marriage happens tomorrow. He paused. I need you legally protected as soon as possible. As my wife, you become untouchable in ways a girlfriend never could be. More logic I couldn't argue with. More perfectly reasonable explanations for his control. Connor had thought of everything. As always. I signed my name on both documents, watching the ink dry, and feeling like I was signing away more than just my marital status. Claire Bennett would cease to exist tomorrow. In her place would be Claire Salvatore, wife of a Mafia boss, mother-to-be, prisoner in a gilded cage. Done, I said, setting down the pen. Connor collected the documents, his expression satisfied. Maria will help you get ready tomorrow. The ceremony is at 2 p.m. Until then, your time is your own. Rest. Explore the house. Do whatever you need to do. And tonight? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Do you expect me to? Tonight you sleep in your own room, Connor interrupted gently. Separate bedrooms, remember? That was in the agreement. I'm not interested in forcing myself on an unwilling woman, Claire. When we share a bed again, it'll be because you want it, not because I demanded it. The again hung between us, loaded with memory, because we had shared a bed before, multiple times, passionate, desperate times that I'd tried to forget and couldn't. Thank you, I said stiffly, not sure what else to say. Connor stood, moving around the table again, and for a heart-stopping moment I thought he was going to kiss me. But he just tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, the gesture achingly familiar. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's a big day." He left me alone in the dining room, surrounded by the remains of a meal I'd barely touched, holding a pen that had just signed away my freedom. Maria appeared a few minutes later to escort me back to my room. She didn't speak, but her expression was kind, almost maternal. When we reached my door, she paused. "He's not as bad as you think," she said quietly in that accented English. "Mr. Salvatore. I've worked for him for 15 years. I've seen him be cruel to his enemies and generous to his friends. But I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." "He's holding me prisoner," I said flatly. "He's keeping you alive," Maria corrected. "There's a difference. You'll see." She started to leave, then turned back. "The baby. When are you due?" "April," I said without thinking. "Early April." Maria smiled, her face softening. "A spring baby. Good. Mr. Salvatore will be a good father, better than his own father was." She patted my arm. "Get some sleep, child. Tomorrow you become family. And family, we protect." She disappeared down the hallway, leaving me standing in the doorway of my beautiful prison. I went inside and locked the door, though I suspected the lock was meaningless in a house where Connor controlled everything. The bed was as soft as I remembered, and despite everything, the fear, the anger, the confusion, I was asleep within minutes of lying down. I dreamed of Connor's hands on my skin, his voice in my ear, his promise that everything would be okay. And in the dream, I believed him. In the dream, the cage felt like safety instead of captivity. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and a wedding dress was hanging on the closet door, white and beautiful and inevitable as fate. Tomorrow had arrived, and with it, the point of no return. The wedding was nothing like I'd imagined weddings should be. No guests filling pews. No flower girls or bridesmaids or nervous relatives dabbing at tears. Just me in a dress I hadn't chosen, standing in Connor's living room across from a judge who'd clearly done this type of ceremony before and knew better than to ask questions. Maria had helped me get ready, her hands gentle as she fixed my hair into an elegant updo and fastened a simple pearl necklace around my neck. The dress fit perfectly, of course. White silk that draped over my still flat stomach, hiding the secret that was growing there. I looked like a bride. I felt like a sacrifice. Connor wore a dark suit that probably cost more than my car used to be worth. He looked devastating, all sharp lines and contained power. His dark eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. When the judge asked if I took Connor Salvatore to be my lawfully wedded husband, my voice came out steadier than I expected. "I do." 2 words that changed everything. 2 words that made me his in the eyes of the law, if not in my heart. When Connor slid the ring onto my finger, a platinum band with diamonds that caught the light and threw rainbows across the room, his hand lingered on mine. "You're safe now," he murmured, so quietly only I could hear. "I promise." The kiss was brief, chaste. Nothing like the kisses we'd shared 6 months ago when everything was still a lie I hadn't recognized yet. But even that brief contact sent electricity through me, a reminder that my body hadn't forgotten what my mind was trying to deny. We signed papers. The judge congratulated us with professional warmth that didn't reach his eyes. Maria produced champagne, though she gave me sparkling cider instead, a small acknowledgement of my condition that felt oddly thoughtful. And just like that, I was married. Claire Salvatore. The name felt foreign in my mouth, like a costume I was wearing that didn't quite fit. "I need to make some calls," Connor said after the judge left. "Business that can't wait. Maria will show you around the rest of the house. Get familiar with everything. This is your home now. My prison, he meant. But I just nodded, too overwhelmed to fight anymore. Maria's tour revealed the true extent of Connor's wealth. The brownstone was much larger than it appeared from the street, with rooms that unfolded one after another in a maze of luxury. A library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A gym that looked like something from a high-end health club. A wine cellar that probably held bottles worth more than my annual salary used to be. An office with security monitors that showed every angle of the house and grounds. Mr. Salvatore is very careful about security, Maria explained, noticing where my gaze had landed on the screens. After what happened 6 months ago, he doesn't take chances. What did happen 6 months ago? I asked, curious despite myself. Maria's expression darkened. An attempt on his life. They came here, to this house. Got past the first layer of security before his men stopped them. 3 of our people died protecting him. After that, Mr. Salvatore upgraded everything. This house is a fortress now, even if it doesn't look like one. The casual mention of death, of people dying to protect Connor, sent a chill through me. This was his world. A world where violence was expected, planned for, built into the architecture. And now I'm part of it, I said softly. Now you're protected by it, Maria corrected. There's a difference, Mrs. Salvatore. You'll see. We continued the tour, but I was only half present, my mind spinning with the implications of what I'd just done. I'd married into a world I didn't understand. Committed myself to a man whose business required armed guards and security cameras and contingency plans for assassination attempts. When Maria finally left me alone in what she called the sitting room, a beautiful space with windows overlooking the garden, I sank onto a velvet couch and tried to process everything. 3 hours ago, I'd been Claire Bennett, struggling waitress and convenience store clerk. Now I was Claire Salvatore, Mafia wife, living in a brownstone that was really a fortress. My phone buzzed, the new one Connor had given me, a text from an unknown number, though I suspected I knew who it was. Congratulations on your wedding, Mrs. Salvatore. Your father is very proud. He'll call you tonight. Relief flooded through me. Dad was okay, still alive, still safe, wherever Connor was keeping him. The relief was immediately followed by guilt. I'd just married a criminal to save my father from other criminals, and I was relieved instead of terrified. What did that make me? You look lost. Connor's voice came from the doorway. I hadn't heard him approach, but there he was, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him since this nightmare began. I was just thinking about how surreal this is, I said, tucking my phone away. This morning, I woke up in my apartment. Now I'm married to you. Surreal, Connor repeated, moving into the room. Is that all? What else should it be? He sat down beside me on the couch, close enough that our legs almost touched. Terrifying? Infuriating? Pick your emotion, Claire. You're entitled to all of them. I'm entitled to none of them, I said bitterly, because you bought them all when you orchestrated this situation. My fear, my anger, my choices, all of it belongs to you now. No. Connor turned to face me fully, his expression serious. Your feelings are your own. I manipulated circumstances. I created pressure. But how you feel about it, that's entirely yours. How magnanimous. It's true. He reached out and took my hand, his fingers warm around mine. I won't apologize for bringing you here, Claire. I won't apologize for protecting what's mine. But I'm not trying to control your heart, just your safety. There's a difference? There has to be. Something vulnerable flickered in his dark eyes, because if I've only captured your body and not your heart, then I've failed at what matters most. The admission caught me off guard, You actually care if I love you? I care if you let yourself love me again, Connor corrected. Because you did once. 3 months of something real before I had to walk away. I felt it, Claire. The way you looked at me. The way you laughed at my terrible jokes. The way you fit against me like you were made for it. Memory flooded back. Those 3 months had been real for me too. Intensely. Desperately real. I'd fallen for Connor Salvatore before I knew who he really was. What he really did. And when he disappeared, it had felt like losing a limb. That was before I knew you were a criminal, I said. But the protest sounded weak even to my own ears. I'm the same person I was then, Connor said quietly. The only difference is now you know the full scope of what I do. But the man who held you at night? Who listened to your dreams about going back to nursing school? Who promised to help make those dreams come true? That man is still here, Claire. He never left. He manipulated me from the start. He loved you from the start, Connor countered. Everything else was just logistics. The twisted logic should have made me angry. Instead, I felt something else. Something dangerous. A softening in my chest, a weakening of the walls I'd been trying to build. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered. Live in your world, be your wife. Raise a child surrounded by violence and danger. You won't be surrounded by it, Connor said. You'll be protected from it. There's a difference. My world touches you only in the ways I allow it to, and I allow very little. As if to prove his point, his phone rang. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. I need to take this. Work. It won't take long. He stood and moved to the window, phone to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian that I couldn't follow. But I caught enough to understand the tone. Business. Cold, calculated, dangerous business. This was who Connor Salvatore really was. Not the man who'd held me gently during our wedding ceremony, but the one giving orders that probably meant violence for someone somewhere. The duality was dizzying. When he finished the call, he turned back to me, his expression softer again. I have to go out tonight. Business I can't reschedule, but I want you to know. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I want you to know that every choice I make from now on is about keeping you safe, even the ones that seem cruel, even the ones you don't understand. Where are you going? It's better if you don't know the details. Connor crossed back to me, tilting my chin up so I had to meet his eyes. But I'll tell you this. Marco Vitelli made a mistake today. He sent men to your old apartment again. They hurt someone trying to find out where you went. My blood ran cold. Who? Your landlord. He'll live, but Vitelli made his message clear. He wants you, Claire. He wants to use you to draw me out, to force my hand. Connor's thumb stroked my cheekbone. So, tonight, I'm sending him a message back, one that makes it very clear what happens to people who threaten what's mine. You're going to kill someone. Not a question. A statement. I'm going to protect my wife, Connor corrected, by any means necessary. He kissed my forehead, gentle and chaste, then straightened. Maria will stay with you tonight. There are guards throughout the house. You're completely safe here, but don't leave the property. Don't open the door for anyone except Maria or me. Understand? I nodded, too numb to do anything else. Connor left, taking his darkness and his danger with him. I sat alone in the beautiful sitting room, the weight of my wedding ring heavy on my finger, and wondered what kind of violence was being committed in my name tonight. Hours passed. Maria brought dinner, which I barely touched. She tried to make conversation, but I was too lost in my own thoughts to respond with more than monosyllables. Eventually, she left me alone with a promise to check on me before bed. At midnight, my father called. His voice was warm and confused, congratulating me on a wedding he didn't understand, and asking questions I couldn't answer. I told him I was fine, told him I was happy, lied with a practiced ease that scared me. When I finally went to bed, sleep wouldn't come. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house settling around me. Somewhere out there, Connor was doing terrible things to protect me. Violence committed in my name, blood spilled for my safety, and the worst part was that I was grateful. Grateful that someone was finally taking care of me. Grateful that I didn't have to face the danger alone. Grateful that Connor Salvatore had decided I was worth protecting, even if his methods were monstrous. What did that make me? The answer came at 3 a.m. when I heard Connor return. His footsteps in the hallway, pausing outside my door. I held my breath, wondering if he'd come in, if he'd demand his husbandly rights despite the agreement. But he just stood there for a moment, his presence palpable even through the closed door. Then he moved on, his footsteps receding toward his own bedroom. I was relieved and disappointed and terrified of what both those feelings meant. Days passed. I settled into a routine that felt surreal in its domesticity. Breakfast with Connor when his schedule allowed. Afternoons exploring the house and gardens. Evenings either alone or at carefully orchestrated dinners where Connor introduced me to business associates who smiled with their mouths, but not their eyes. I learned quickly that being Connor's wife came with its own kind of power. People who dismissed me at first glance would catch sight of my wedding ring or hear my name, and their attitudes would shift immediately. Respect tinged with fear. Deference earned not through my own actions, but through my association with a dangerous man. It was intoxicating and revolting in equal measure. 2 weeks into the marriage, Connor took me shopping. Not to department stores or boutiques where normal people shopped, but to private showrooms, where designers brought entire collections for my perusal. I emerged with a wardrobe worth more than I used to make in a year, all of it carefully selected to present the image Connor wanted. Elegant, sophisticated, unmistakably wealthy. "You look beautiful," he said, watching me model a dress that cost more than my old car. "Like you were born to this." I wasn't, I reminded him. I was born to a working-class family in a working-class neighborhood. This isn't who I am. "This is who you are now," Connor countered. "Claire Salvatore, my wife, the mother of my child. Get used to it." The possessiveness should have irritated me. Instead, it sent a thrill through me that I tried desperately to ignore. At night, I'd lie in my bed, hearing Connor move through his own room next door, and remember what it felt like when we shared a bed. His hands on my skin, his mouth against my neck. The way he'd whisper in Italian, words I didn't understand but felt in my bones. The separation was its own kind of torture. Worse because I knew it was my choice. Connor had made that clear. He wouldn't touch me until I asked, until I admitted that I wanted him despite everything he'd done. And I was starting to want him. God help me. I was starting to want him so badly it hurt. 3 weeks after the wedding, everything changed. I was in the garden, reading a book and trying not to think about how much my life had transformed, when Maria came running out, her face pale with fear. "Mrs. Salvatore, you need to come inside. Now." The urgency in her voice sent adrenaline spiking through me. I followed her into the house, where Connor was waiting in his office, surrounded by security monitors and men with guns visible in their holsters. "What's wrong?" I asked, my heart hammering. Connor's expression was grim. "Vitelli made his move. He has someone inside my organization, a mole who's been feeding him information." His dark eyes met mine. "He knows about the baby, Claire. He knows when you're due. And he's planning something." The room spun. "How does he know?" "Because someone I trusted betrayed me," Connor said, his voice cold enough to freeze. "But that's being handled. Right now, what matters is keeping you safe. We're leaving Chicago. Tonight. I have a place upstate where no one can find us. We'll stay there until the baby is born, until Vitelli is dealt with. I can't just leave. You don't have a choice, Connor interrupted. This isn't about your freedom anymore, Claire. This is about keeping you and our child alive. Vitelli won't stop. Not until he has what he wants or one of us is dead. The finality in his voice made it clear this wasn't a discussion. It was an order. And despite everything, despite my resentment of his control, I was terrified enough to be grateful for it. When do we leave? I asked quietly. 2 hours. Connor moved toward me, his hands coming to rest on my shoulders. Pack what you need. Everything else will be replaced. And Claire? He waited until I met his eyes. From this moment on, you don't leave my sight unless I explicitly tell you it's safe. Understand? I nodded, too scared to argue. As I left to pack, I heard Connor on the phone, speaking in that cold, dangerous voice that reminded me exactly who I'd married. He was giving orders, planning violence, orchestrating the kind of response that would make Marco Vitelli regret ever threatening what belonged to Connor Salvatore. And I was what belonged to him now, his wife, his possession, his to protect by any means necessary. The cage was closing tighter, but for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to escape anymore. The safe house wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined something remote and rustic, hidden deep in the woods where no one would think to look. Instead, Connor brought me to a compound that looked more like a luxury resort, set on 50 acres of private land in upstate New York. High walls, armed guards, security that made the Chicago brownstone look amateur by comparison. This is where I come when things get dangerous, Connor explained, as we drove through gates that closed behind us with ominous finality. No one outside my inner circle knows this place exists. We'll be safe here. Safe. The word had lost all meaning over the past month. I'd thought I was safe in my apartment, safe at my jobs, safe in the life I'd built for myself. But safety had been an illusion all along, shattered the moment Connor Salvatore decided he wanted me. The main house was enormous, all stone and glass, with views that would have taken my breath away if I'd had any breath left to take. Maria had come with us, along with 6 of Connor's men whose names I'd learned over the past weeks. Marco, Luca, Giovanni, Dante. Each one deadly in their own way, each one utterly loyal to the man who now owned me. "How long do we stay here?" I asked, as Connor led me through the house to a master suite that was bigger than my entire old apartment. "As long as it takes." His expression was grim. "Vitelli won't give up easily, but neither will I. This ends when one of us is dead, Claire, and it won't be me." The casual way he spoke about death, about killing another human being, should have horrified me. A month ago it would have. But I'd been living in Connor's world long enough now to understand that violence wasn't an aberration. It was currency. The way disputes were settled and power was maintained. Days blurred together. I spent my time reading, walking the grounds with armed escorts, and watching my belly slowly begin to show. 4 months pregnant now. The baby was real in a way it hadn't been before, visible proof of the connection between Connor and me that would last long after the 6-month agreement expired. If it ever expired. I was starting to doubt that it would. Connor was different here, more relaxed in some ways, more tense in others. He worked constantly, phone calls and video conferences with men whose faces I never saw. "Business," he said. "The legitimate kind and the other kind." I'd stopped asking which was which. At night, he'd knock on my door, asking if I needed anything, asking if I was comfortable. Never pushing, never demanding, but always there. A constant presence that was becoming less suffocating and more comforting as time passed. I hated that I was getting used to this. hated that the cage was starting to feel like home. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in November. I woke to shouting, the sound of running feet, the crack of gunfire that sent my heart into my throat. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands, but before I could call Connor, my door burst open. It wasn't Connor. It wasn't Maria or any of the guards I recognized. It was a stranger, dressed in black, with cold eyes and a gun pointed directly at me. "Mrs. Salvatore," he said with a smile that made my blood freeze. "Mr. Vitelli would like to have a word with you." Terror flooded my system, pure and primal. My hand moved instinctively to my stomach, protecting the life growing there. "Please," I whispered. "Please don't hurt my baby." "That depends entirely on your husband," the man said. "Now move. We don't have much time." He grabbed my arm, yanking me from the bed. I stumbled, my legs weak, my mind screaming that this couldn't be happening. Connor had promised I was safe, had promised his security was unbreakable. But someone had broken it. Someone had gotten through. The stranger dragged me into the hallway, where chaos reigned. I could hear gunfire from other parts of the house, shouting in Italian, the sounds of a battle I couldn't see. How many of them were there? How had they gotten in? "Move faster," my captor snarled, shoving me forward. We were heading toward a back staircase, away from the main areas of the house. Away from Connor. Away from safety. This was it. This was how it ended. Kidnapped by Connor's rival, used as leverage, probably killed once I'd served my purpose. The baby would die with me, all because I'd gotten tangled up with a man whose world was violence and death. We'd almost reached the stairs when Connor appeared at the end of the hallway. His suit was torn. Blood streaked his face from a cut above his eyebrow. And the gun in his hand was pointed directly at the man holding me. "Let her go." Connor's voice was flat, emotionless, more terrifying than any rage could have been. "Let her go, and I'll make your death quick." "I don't think so," my captor said, pressing the barrel of his gun against my temple. The cold metal made me whimper, and I saw something flash in Connor's eyes. Something feral and murderous. "Lower your weapon, Salvatore, or I paint the walls with your wife's brain." "You won't kill her," Connor said with absolute certainty. "Vitelli wants her alive. She's only valuable as leverage if she's breathing." "Maybe." The man's arm tightened around my throat. "But accidents happen. Lower. Your weapon." For a moment, I thought Connor would refuse. Thought he'd gamble on being faster, on being able to take the shot before the man holding me could pull his trigger. The calculation was there in his eyes, cold and precise. Then he lowered the gun. "Good," my captor said. "Now kick it away." Connor complied, the weapon sliding across the hardwood floor until it was out of reach. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his dark eyes. Fear. Real. Genuine fear. "It's going to be okay," he said quietly. "I promise, Claire. It's going to be okay." "Touching," the man holding me sneered. "Now back up. We're leaving, and you're going to let us go, or—" He never finished the sentence. The bullet caught him in the side of the head, spraying blood and worse across the wall. His grip on me loosened and I fell, hitting the floor hard enough to knock the breath from my lungs. I looked up to see Marco at the other end of the hallway, gun still raised, expression cold as ice. He'd taken the shot Connor couldn't risk, threading the needle between me and my captor with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Connor was there in an instant, pulling me up, his hands running over me frantically. "Are you hurt? Did he hurt you? The baby?" "I'm fine," I gasped, though I wasn't sure it was true. My ears were ringing from the gunshot. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't make them stop. And there was blood on my nightgown, though I wasn't sure if it was mine or the dead man's. Connor pulled me against his chest, one hand cradling the back of my head, the other pressed against my stomach where our baby was growing. "I've got you," he murmured into my hair. "I've got you. You're safe now." But I wasn't safe. That was the illusion Connor had been selling from the beginning. As long as I was connected to him, I would never be safe. Danger would always find me. Men with guns would always come. "How many?" Connor asked Marco, his voice hardening as he shifted from terrified husband back to Mafia boss. 4 made it inside, all dead now. Vitelli sent them on a suicide mission. Marco's expression was grim. "We have one alive. He's talking." Connor's arms tightened around me. "Take Claire to the panic room. Stay with her until I come back." "No." The word came out stronger than I expected. "No, I'm not going anywhere without you." Connor pulled back to look at me, his expression conflicted. "Claire." "They almost took me," I said, my voice shaking. "They got through your security, got into this house that was supposed to be impregnable. If I'm in a panic room alone and something happens to you, I'm trapped. I'm vulnerable. I stay with you." Something shifted in Connor's expression. Pride, maybe, or approval. "All right," he said finally. "But you do exactly what I say. No arguments. Understand?" I nodded, too shaken to do anything else. What followed was the most terrifying hour of my life. Connor had the surviving attacker brought to a room I'd never seen before, deep in the basement of the house. He made me wait outside with Marco, but I could hear everything. The questions asked in that cold, flat voice. The screams when answers weren't forthcoming. The sickening sounds of violence that made my stomach turn. When Connor emerged, his hands were bloody and his expression was murderous. "Vitelli is in Chicago, at one of his warehouses on the south side. He's waiting for word that his men succeeded." Connor's dark eyes met mine. "This ends tonight, Claire, one way or another." "What are you going to do?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I'm going to kill him." No hesitation, no doubt, just cold certainty. "I'm going to end this threat permanently so you and our baby can live without looking over your shoulders." "Connor, no." He cut me off, his hands coming to frame my face. "No arguments. This is what has to happen. Vitelli threatened you, tried to take you, tried to hurt our child. That can't stand, Claire. In my world, that kind of disrespect only ends one way." I understood then. Really understood. This wasn't about business or territory or pride. This was personal. Vitelli had made it personal the moment he targeted me. And Connor was going to respond the only way he knew how. With overwhelming, brutal violence. "I'm coming with you," I said. "Absolutely not." "Yes." I grabbed his wrists, holding his hands against my face. "You said I don't leave your sight unless you say it's safe. Well, I don't feel safe here anymore. They breached your security once. What's to stop them from doing it again?" Connor's jaw tightened. "The men I'm bringing are all I trust completely. Having you there makes you vulnerable," I finished. "I know, but I need to see this, Connor. I need to see what you do to protect us. I need to understand who you really are." It was a test, and we both knew it. The final barrier between the illusion I'd been clinging to and the reality of who Connor Salvatore was. If I went with him tonight, if I witnessed what he was capable of, there would be no more pretending, no more distance. I'd be complicit in his world completely. Connor searched my face for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Get dressed. Warm clothes. We leave in 10 minutes. The warehouse was exactly what I expected. Dark, abandoned-looking from the outside, but lights visible through grimy windows on the upper floors. Connor's men surrounded it methodically, cutting off escape routes, ensuring no one inside could call for help. Connor made me stay in the car with Marco, watching through tinted windows as he and his men entered the building. The next 20 minutes were agony, waiting, wondering, imagining all the ways this could go wrong. Then the shooting started, brief, brutal, over almost before it began. When Connor emerged, he was alone. His clothes were splattered with blood that wasn't his. His expression was calm, almost serene, the look of a man who'd just solved a problem permanently. He got into the car, and I saw it in his eyes. Vitelli was dead. The threat was over. We were safe. "It's done," he said simply. I should have been horrified. Should have recoiled from the blood, from the violence, from the casual way Connor had just orchestrated a man's death. But all I felt was relief. Overwhelming, shameful relief that the danger was over. That my baby was safe. That Connor had kept his promise. "Thank you," I whispered. Connor's expression softened. He reached for my hand, threading his bloody fingers through mine. "I would burn the entire world to keep you safe," he said quietly. "You need to understand that, Claire. There's nothing I won't do. No line I won't cross. You and our baby, you're everything." And there, in the back of that car, surrounded by the aftermath of violence, I finally surrendered completely. The walls I'd been building crumbled. The distance I'd been maintaining collapsed. I leaned across the seat and kissed him, tasting blood and danger, and the twisted devotion of a man who showed love through murder. Connor kissed me back with the hunger of 6 months of separation, his hands tangling in my hair, pulling me as close as the seatbelts would allow. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "I'm not letting you go," he murmured. "After 6 months, when the agreement expires, I'm not letting you go, Claire. I never was. This was always forever." "I know," I said. And I did. I'd known for weeks. Maybe longer. "I know, Connor. And you're staying anyway." It wasn't a question, but I answered it. I'm staying anyway. Because somewhere along the way, between the manipulation and the control and the violence, I'd fallen in love with my captor. Not the man he pretended to be, but the man he actually was. Dangerous and possessive and utterly devoted in the most twisted way possible. We went back to Chicago the next day, back to the brownstone that was no longer a prison, but a home. My father was released from protective custody, given a new identity, and enough money to disappear somewhere safe and start over. He hugged me goodbye with tears in his eyes, not understanding what I'd become, but accepting it anyway. 6 months came and went. The deadline passed without mention. The prenuptial agreement with its $5 million escape clause sat in a drawer, unsigned, forgotten. Because I wasn't leaving. Connor had been right all along. The choice was mine. And I chose him. The baby was born in April, a girl with dark eyes like her father, and a cry that could wake the dead. Connor held her with a gentleness I'd never seen from him, tears streaming down his face as he whispered promises in Italian. Promises of protection, of love, of a life where she would never want for anything. "What should we name her?" he asked, looking at me with such vulnerability it made my heart ache. "Grace," I said, touching our daughter's tiny hand. "Grace Salvatore, because she's our second chance. Our Grace." Connor smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face from dangerous to beautiful. "Grace," he repeated, "perfect." And it was perfect, in its own twisted way. This life I'd never chosen but had come to accept. This man I'd never meant to love but couldn't imagine living without. This family built on violence and control, and a devotion so absolute it crossed every boundary. I was Claire Salvatore, wife, mother, prisoner who'd fallen in love with her cage. And I'd never been happier in my life. The realization should have terrified me. Maybe it did, somewhere deep down where the old Claire still existed. But that Claire was gone, buried under months of luxury and protection, and the twisted logic of Stockholm Syndrome that had become my truth. Connor had promised forever, and I'd given it to him. Not because I had to, but because somewhere along the way, I'd stopped wanting to escape. The cage door had been open all along. I just chose not to walk through it. And as I lay in Connor's arms that night, our daughter sleeping peacefully in the nursery next door, guards patrolling the halls, and the weight of my choices settling over me like a blanket, I finally understood. Connor hadn't trapped me. He'd given me an excuse to stay, had orchestrated circumstances that let me surrender without admitting I wanted to, had built a cage so beautiful I could pretend it was freedom. And I was grateful for it. Grateful for the manipulation, grateful for the control, grateful that Connor Salvatore had decided I was worth keeping. Because the alternative, facing the world alone, poor, struggling, vulnerable, was so much worse than being owned by a man who loved me enough to kill for me. "I love you," I whispered into the darkness. Connor's arms tightened around me. "I know," he murmured back. "I've always known. That's why I never let you go." And I believed him. Believed that he'd seen something in me 9 months ago in that coffee shop. Seen my potential for surrender. My capacity for loving a monster. My ability to adapt to captivity. He'd been right about me. About us. About forever. The 6 months had been a lie, but the love was real. Twisted, possessive, built on manipulation and violence, but real. And it was enough. It had to be enough. Because I was never leaving. Not now. Not ever. I was his. Completely. Willingly. Forever.